The evening air in Charleston carried that mix of salt from the harbor and the sweet, heavy scent of blooming magnolias. I stepped through the arched entry of Drusilla's house, the sound of polite laughter and clinking glasses wrapping around me like an unwelcome shawl. Her home looked like something pulled from the pages of a lifestyle magazine: polished hardwood floors, gleaming chandeliers, not a cushion out of place. I'd been here enough times to know every inch was curated, every flower arrangement strategically placed to impress. "Ivania!" My cousin Janice swept in, glass of champagne in hand. "Still running that little flower shop?" The way she tilted her head made it sound like a hobby I'd outgrown, not the business I'd poured my soul into since Mom passed. "Still running it," I replied evenly. "We just finished the spring wedding season. It's been busy." She gave a vague smile, already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. I moved deeper inside, nodding to a few relatives, noting the sidelong glances, the way their questions always came back to what I wasn't doing rather than what I had achieved. From the corner of the room, Drusilla spotted me. Perfectly coiffed, her navy silk dress catching the light, she was in her element. The dining table was set in white linen, the silverware aligned with military precision. Through the open French doors, I caught a breath of warm spring air, the faint rustle of the garden hedges a reminder that there was a world outside this polished bubble. As conversation quieted, Drusilla lifted her glass. "To family," she began, her voice carrying just enough warmth to seem sincere. She turned, the smile still fixed, but her eyes locked on mine. "And to knowing when it's time to let go. You're too poor to stay here." The words landed with a weight that pressed against my chest. For a split second, the room froze. Forks paused mid-air, conversations stilled. Then came the soft, uneasy laughter, some guests raising glasses without meeting my gaze. I tightened my grip on the stem of my glass, letting her see nothing but a calm face. Mom's voice echoed in my mind. "People show you who they are in the little moments." I took a slow sip of wine, not because I wanted it, but to give myself a beat to decide whether to answer her. In the end, I simply inclined my head, as though she'd made a charming observation instead of a public jab. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence can be sharper than a retort. Dinner was served, and Drusilla took her rightful place at the head of the table. I was halfway down, between two aunts who spent most of the meal whispering updates about grandchildren and real estate deals. Drusilla launched into a story about building success from the ground up, her gaze sweeping the table before resting on me again. "Of course," she said with a small laugh, "some people just can't handle success, so they cling to little things." The words dripped with sugar, the kind you stir into tea just to hide the bitterness. A few chuckles floated around. One uncle patted my shoulder as if I'd been caught in a harmless joke. I kept my eyes on my plate, but my mind was elsewhere. On the years I'd kept the shop alive through lean seasons, the nights I'd stayed up wiring arrangements for last-minute orders, the way the smell of fresh-cut roses reminded me of the afternoons Mom and I spent in the back room, planning a future I thought would always be mine. Beneath the table, my fingers pressed into my napkin. I began mentally cataloging each slight, tucking them away like carefully labeled files. I remembered another of Mom's sayings: "Don't fight in the open, win in the shadows." Across the table, Drusilla kept glancing at her phone between bites, her polished nails tapping against the screen. She was hiding something. People only check their phones like that when they're waiting for news that matters. Midway through the main course, Corwin Haskett appeared in the doorway, speaking briefly with one of the servers. When his eyes met mine, he gave a quick nod and the kind of half-smile that says, "I know more than I'm letting on." He didn't stay, just disappeared into the hall, leaving me to wonder what he was doing here. By dessert, Drusilla was congratulating herself on hosting the perfect evening, her tone light but smug. I smiled politely, pushing my plate away, already thinking about the invoices waiting for me at the shop. "Leaving so soon?" she called as I rose. "It's been lovely," I said, keeping my voice smooth. "Thank you for having me." The truth was, I needed air. As I stepped onto the porch, the sounds of clinking glasses and polite chatter faded behind me, replaced by the chirp of crickets and the distant hum of traffic. The Charleston night wrapped around me, warm and steady, like a reminder that life outside her walls still belonged to me. At the curb, I pulled out my phone, scrolling past unanswered texts from Drusilla about family contributions and property discussions I'd been avoiding. My thumb stopped on a new message from an unknown number. "We need to talk about your shop." The words lit up the screen, stark against the darkness around me. That's when I knew tonight's insult was just the surface of something much deeper. The next morning, I unlocked the shop early, the soft jingle of the bell over the door greeting me. Magnolia moss smelled the way it always did, like lilies and fresh-cut greenery, a mix that felt like safety. Sunlight streamed in through the front windows, catching on the floating dust motes above the worn pine floorboards. Normally, that light warmed me. Today, it just reminded me of how exposed I was. I shrugged off my coat and headed to the counter, finding Marcy, my part-time assistant, already there. She was restocking vases but kept glancing at me like she had something on her mind. "Morning," I said, setting my bag down. "You're in early." "Yeah," she replied, her voice tight. There's something you should hear." I stopped, waiting. "This morning at the market," she began, "I overheard two women talking. They said Magnolia Moss was on its last legs, that you couldn't even keep the lights on." She hesitated. One of them mentioned they'd heard it from someone who knows the family. I leaned on the counter, letting the words settle. My shop was paid up on every bill. Business was steady. Lies that specific don't just appear, they're planted. "Did they say a name?" I asked. "No, but they sure said it loud enough for people to hear." The timing was too neat to ignore. Drusilla had publicly cut me down at dinner last night. Now a rumor was spreading that my shop was failing. I didn't believe in coincidences that neat. Before I could respond, the bell above the door rang again. A man in a tailored suit stepped inside, scanning the place with a practiced eye. He introduced himself as Richard Nolan from Palmetto Development. "Lovely shop," he said, as if appraising it for a catalog. "I'm here to confirm a few details. We're finalizing paperwork on this property." I blinked. "Paperwork? This building belongs to my family." He glanced at his tablet. "Yes, well, the sale is nearly complete. I just need to verify access points for renovations." My pulse spiked. The shop was mine in every practical sense. I paid the mortgage, kept the lights on, but the deed was still under Drusilla's name. It had been simpler that way years ago, when she offered to help with the original purchase. A mistake I'd never stopped regretting. After Nolan left, I didn't waste a minute. I stepped into the back room and called Drusilla. She answered on the third ring, her voice syrupy. "Ivania, what a surprise. Tell me you didn't sell the shop." A pause. "Of course I did. You'll thank me later. This place was dragging you down. Now you can focus on other things." "You had no right." "I had every right," she cut in smoothly. "It's my name on the deed. I got a great price, and frankly, I saved you from drowning. You can stay on as a tenant for a few months if you need time." My jaw tightened. She was framing it as a rescue, exactly matching the lie already circulating in the market. "And you started the rumors to make sure no one questioned it," I said. Her laugh was low. "Rumors spread themselves. People notice when someone's struggling." I ended the call before my temper made me say something I couldn't take back. The rest of the day, I moved through orders on autopilot. Around mid-afternoon, Mrs. Langford, one of my most loyal customers, stopped in for her weekly bouquet. She lowered her voice at the counter. "I heard you might be closing?" I forced a smile. "Don't believe everything you hear. Magnolia Moss is open and staying that way." She nodded, but her eyes searched mine for reassurance. I kept my hands steady as I wrapped her flowers, even though my mind was already shifting into a different gear. I wouldn't confront Drusilla again, not yet. First, I needed information. Paper trails. Allies. By closing time, the street outside had gone quiet, the last of the afternoon light fading to gold. I locked the door, flipped the sign, and turned to gather my things. That's when I noticed the SUV across the street. The driver sat in shadow, phone to his ear, glancing at my shop between scribbling in a notebook. If they thought I'd walk away quietly, they didn't know me at all. The shop was quiet in the late afternoon, the kind of stillness that made every creak of the old floor sound louder. I sat in the back office with the overhead light dimmed, a stack of sales receipts in front of me. Above my desk hung a framed photograph of my mother, smiling in the shop doorway, and just above that, the brass-rimmed wall clock she'd brought over from her own kitchen. Its steady tick was my metronome, grounding me as I tried to focus on the numbers. The phone rang, breaking the rhythm. I picked it up without checking the caller ID. "Magnolia Moss, this is Ivania." "Sweetheart, it's Aunt Ruth," came the warm but hesitant voice on the other end. "I just wanted to check on you. I've been hearing some things." I leaned back in my chair. "What kind of things?" "That business has been tough for you. That you've been too proud to ask for help." Her tone suggested she didn't fully believe it, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I let the silence stretch before answering. "Ruth, the shop is fine. We're still booking weddings, still paying bills." She hesitated again. "Well, I also heard the new owners might want to modernize the place. You know, give it a sleeker look. They might even get rid of that old clock." For a moment, I forgot to breathe. The clock? My eyes went up to it, the familiar pendulum swinging gently. "Yes, honey. Someone said they thought it was outdated." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. That clock wasn't just decor. It was one of the last pieces of my mother I had left. I could see her in my mind, winding it every Sunday afternoon, telling me, "As long as it ticks, we're still together." The thought of someone tossing it into a dumpster as part of a modern look made my stomach turn. After we hung up, I sat still for a while, listening to the clock's steady beat, but the quiet didn't last. Within an hour, I'd fielded 2 more calls, one from a cousin in Colombia, another from my Uncle George in Savannah. Different voices, same story. Drusilla had been reaching out to concerned family members, letting them know I'd been drowning in debt and that she'd stepped in, out of pure generosity, to relieve me of the burden. "She just didn't want you to go under in public," George told me, his words careful, like he thought I might snap. "And she said all this to you directly?" I asked. "Well, yes, and she made me promise to encourage you to move on from the shop gracefully." By the third conversation, I could hear the repetition. Same phrasing, same undertone, like she was reading from a script. I wrote down their exact words on a yellow pad, lining them up like bullet points in a case file. The pieces started fitting together, her little toast at dinner, the sudden appearance of the property developer, now a phone campaign aimed at painting me as reckless, and her as the benevolent savior. This wasn't spur of the moment. She'd been laying the groundwork for weeks. I picked up the phone again, this time dialing a number I hadn't used in years. My cousin Lorraine was infamous for loving other people's business almost as much as her own, and she was terrible at keeping secrets. "Evania, long time," she said, a little too brightly. "I know," I replied. "Listen, I just wanted to check in. You've probably heard about the shop." She made a sound like a guilty laugh. "Of course, we all have. Drusilla's been, well, you know." She told me about her new flagship location, said it was going to be perfect once the transition was over. My grip tightened on the receiver. "She told you that when?" "Oh, must have been 2, maybe 3 weeks ago?" That was all I needed. Weeks before she called me, before the so-called buyer walked through my door, Drusilla was already talking about her flagship. I kept my tone neutral. "Thanks for letting me know, Lorraine." After we hung up, I looked again at the clock on the wall, the pendulum swinging like it always had. I whispered to it, to Mom, to myself, "Over my dead body." Just then, my phone buzzed on the desk. A new text from an unfamiliar number lit up the screen. "I know what she's planning next. We should talk." For the first time since this started, I felt the tide turning, and I intended to ride it. 3 days after learning how far Drusilla had gone to poison the family well, Corwin called. "Got a minute to come by?" His tone was clipped, businesslike, the way it got when he'd found something worth paying attention to. "I've got something you need to see." By late afternoon, I was standing outside his logistics office, a converted warehouse tucked between the riverfront and a row of aging brick buildings. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee that had been reheated more times than I cared to count. Tall metal racks held event crates labeled in bold marker, stacks of folded canvas tents leaned against one wall, and a massive planning board dominated the space behind his desk. Corwin didn't waste time. He pulled a thick roll of paper from a tube and spread it across the desk, weighing the corners down with coffee mugs and a stapler. "You're going to want to sit for this," he said. I leaned in, scanning the title block, Betrayal Lux Events, Flagship Headquarters Expansion. My eyes went straight to the address, and my breath caught. "This is my shop," I said. "Magnolia Moss. That's my building." The drawing showed every square foot of the property. The front windows where I'd arranged seasonal displays for years? Gone, replaced with a wall of glass and a polished steel awning. The workroom in back where Mom and I used to assemble wedding bouquets. Erased, marked for demolition to make way for a VIP event lounge. "Keep looking," Corwin urged. I scanned the notes, the line weights, the shading that indicated structural changes. It wasn't just a renovation, it was a complete erasure. The flower shop didn't exist anywhere on this paper. Then he pointed to the lower corner. Date: 3 months before the sale. I straightened slowly, the paper blurring for a second. She was already planning this before she even hinted at helping me. "This was never about helping you," Corwin said quietly. "It was about owning you." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Drusilla's name lit the screen. I almost ignored it, but the text preview stopped me. "We should meet. I have a way to fix everything." I met her that evening at a coffee shop halfway between downtown and the historic district. She was already seated in a corner booth, a leather folder in front of her. "Evania," she greeted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm glad you came. I think we can resolve this without any more unpleasantness." She slid the folder across the table. "This contract will ensure you're taken care of. A generous payout now, continued involvement in the business you love, just with my name on the paperwork permanently. Think of it as stability for both of us." I flipped through the pages. Buried in the legalese was the hook, full transfer of branding, ownership, and operational control to her. My name wouldn't just come off the deed, it would vanish from every piece of Magnolia Moss, down to the embossed gift tags. "You're asking me to sign away everything," I said evenly. "I'm offering you freedom," she countered. "You've been under strain for years. Opportunities like this don't last forever." I closed the folder gently, as if it were fragile glass. "You don't fix things, Drusilla. You own them. But not me." Her lips twitched, irritation breaking through the polished mask for a fraction of a second. "Think it over," she said, sliding the folder back into her bag. "I already have," I said, standing. Back at the shop that night, I pinned the blueprint to my office wall, red ink circling dates and scribbled names. The clock ticked steadily above me, the sound loud in the quiet room. My phone buzzed again. The same unknown number from before. "She's moving faster than you think. Tomorrow night, I'll show you. If tomorrow was her move, I'd be ready to make mine." The shop was quiet, except for the hum of the cooler in the corner. I sat in the back office with a pile of vendor invoices spread out before me, the edges curling from being shuffled too many times. I was looking for patterns, anything off, any new charges that didn't line up. My eyes were tired, but my mind wouldn't stop running over the last week, every move Drusilla had made, every word she'd twisted. When my email pinged, I almost ignored it. Then I noticed the sender, Drusilla's assistant. It looked like it had been sent to me by mistake, CC'd along with a list of suppliers. Curiosity pushed me to open it. Inside was a forwarded message from a bank. Attached, a PDF. I clicked it open, my breath slowing as I scanned the first lines. Notice of overdue corporate loan payment. The next sentence punched hard. Failure to resolve within 30 days will result in asset seizure. I leaned back, letting the weight of that sink in. So this was why she needed my shop. My stability could have covered her instability. While she was playing the role of the shrewd, successful businesswoman, she was scrambling to keep the bank from knocking on her door. I could see her in my mind, standing at the head of that dinner table, smirking, tossing out those barbed lines about my little shop while this letter was sitting in her inbox. The contrast made my stomach twist. I closed the laptop, grabbed my keys, and made a call. "Zarina, it's Ivania. I need to see you today. It's important." Her office was across town, in a renovated historic building with polished mahogany trim and a faint citrus scent in the air. She met me at the door herself, offered me coffee, and gestured toward a chair in front of her desk. "I've been expecting you," she said, pulling a thin folder from her credenza. "I think you'll want to see this before you decide your next step." I handed her my printout of the bank notice. She nodded slowly. "This explains a lot. And it matches something I found." She opened the folder, laying a contract on the desk between us. I recognized it immediately, my shop sale agreement. But my stomach turned when I saw the date, 2 weeks before she told me anything about it. "She didn't just take it," I said quietly, my eyes scanning the clauses. "She rehearsed taking it." "Exactly," Zarina replied. "And if you read here," she tapped the page, "you'll see she already had the property listed as Phase 1 in her flagship expansion. This wasn't an emergency sale. It was a step in a long plan." I kept my voice level, though the anger was sharp under the surface. She planned this whole thing while pretending to be doing me a favor. Zarina leaned back. "I know you want to confront her, but right now, that would just tip your hand. Keep collecting. Build the file. The best wins are signed, sealed, and in your favor before the other side knows they've lost. You don't win by shouting," I repeated, looking her in the eye. "You win by signing the last page," she said with a small smile. "Then I'll make sure my signature is the one that ends her story." We went over the details for another half hour, mapping out who I needed to talk to, what records to request, and how to keep her from catching wind of what I was doing. By the time I left, the sun was setting, painting the brick buildings in warm gold. Back at the shop, I unlocked the office drawer where the blueprint already lay. I placed the contract copy on top, both of them side by side, 2 pieces of evidence that, together, told a story Drusilla wouldn't want aired. My phone buzzed, screen lighting up with the same unknown number. "She's making her next move tonight. Are you ready to see?" I wasn't just ready, I was counting on it. Morning light spilled across the counter at Magnolia Moss, catching the green glass of the vases stacked to one side. I'd come in early, not because there was anything pressing in the shop, but because I wanted the quiet. My coffee steamed beside me as I clicked open the spreadsheet I'd been building for days. Rows of names, small shareholders in Betrayal Lux events, lined up beside figures I knew by heart now. I refreshed my inbox, pretending to skim supplier updates while my mind was on the email thread with a private broker. He'd sourced the first bundle of debt notes I wanted, all tied to Drusilla's company. The numbers weren't massive yet, but they were enough to get me into the game. I confirmed the wire, my fingers steady on the keys. Progress made in silence is progress they can't stop. 2 hours later, I was in a discreet office on the 2nd floor of a downtown bank. No logos on the glass, no grand reception desk, just a muted space where transactions like mine stayed invisible. The banker, a man in his 50s with a voice like gravel, slid the agreements across the table. "Everything's in order," he said. "You'll hold these under Riverside Holdings," I replied, using the name I'd set up months ago. He glanced at me, curious. "What's the endgame here?" I gave him a faint smile, the kind meant to close a conversation. "Just cleaning up what others have left messy." As I signed, the pen felt heavier than it should. Step by step, without her even smelling the smoke. Back at the shop that afternoon, Hollister walked in, all broad shoulders and the smell of motor oil clinging to his jacket. He claimed he was there to pick up flowers for a friend, but I knew better. We sat with coffee in the corner, the hum of the cooler filling the gaps. "Kid," he began, leaning forward, "you can't win against Drusilla. She's got the money, the name, the reach. I'm telling you this so you don't waste yourself trying." I sipped slowly, giving him nothing at first. "Sometimes," I said finally, "the person with less has nothing left to lose. That's when they're the most dangerous." His eyes narrowed, searching mine for a crack. He didn't find one. By early evening, I was back at my desk, phone pressed to my ear. The broker's voice was calm as he confirmed 2 more debt tranches in motion and 1 minor shareholder ready to sell by week's end. I updated my chart, red pen marking the growing percentage. Each point on that graph was a plank in the bridge I was building in the fog, quiet, unseen, but solid enough to cross when the time came. Later, I walked along the Battery, the seawall stretching ahead under a sky streaked with the last colors of daylight. The tide rolled in slow and sure, the air salted and cool. Hollister's warning replayed in my head, but so did my mother's voice. Don't fight to be in the room. Own the building the room is in. I stopped to watch the water slap against the stones, feeling the weight of the text from the unknown number in my pocket. Tomorrow night, they'd show me something. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with anticipation. At home, I spread everything across the dining table, the blueprint, the pre-signed sale contract, the fresh debt transfer agreements. Side by side, they formed the outline of a story only I knew the ending to. My phone buzzed. The same number. Midnight. Corner of Bay and meeting. Come alone. Midnight couldn't come fast enough. The corner of Bay and meeting was almost deserted at midnight, the harbor air thick with salt and the faint hum of ships shifting in the distance. Street lamps threw long shadows across the cobblestones. I pulled my coat tighter, scanning the dark edges where light didn't quite reach. From one of those shadows, a hooded figure stepped forward. She pushed the hood back, and I finally saw her face, Nova Lee Prentice. She was younger than I expected, but her eyes had the steady look of someone who'd been watching for a long time. "You're the one texting me," I said. She nodded. "And you're running out of time. Drusilla's tightening the noose. She's calling in favors to cut off your supply chain. If she starves your shop, you won't last long enough to fight." I studied her for a moment. "Why are you helping me?" "I used to work for her," Novalee said flatly. "Let's just say I know exactly how far she'll go, and I don't like how she plays her games." I didn't thank her. Trust was currency I wasn't ready to spend. Instead, I told her, if she wants a fight, she'll get one, but I'll choose the ground. The next morning, the phone rang twice before I'd even unlocked the front door. 2 suppliers, one for specialty orchids, the other for imported lilies, both telling me they couldn't fulfill my orders due to recent policy changes. The words were polite, the tone embarrassed. When I pressed, the orchid supplier finally cracked. "Off the record, Drusilla leaned on us, said if we kept working with you, we'd lose her contracts. You didn't hear it from me." I thanked him, keeping my voice calm, then hung up. For the rest of the morning, I smiled for customers while making substitutions on the fly, piecing together orders with whatever stock I had left. Inside, I felt the squeeze getting tighter. Mid-afternoon, the bell over the door chimed, and there she was, Drusilla, carrying 2 coffees and wearing that effortless smile that hid the knives. "I thought we could start fresh," she said, setting 1 cup on the counter like it was a peace offering. From her bag, she pulled out a folder. "These papers will make all this easier for everyone. Just a quick signature from you." "What is it?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Nothing complicated," she said smoothly. "Just confirming inventory transfers for tax purposes. We can get it out of the way now." She was too eager. I excused myself to the back office, flipping the folder open. The language was dense, but halfway down the second page, there it was, a clause granting her irrevocable rights to the shop's name and branding. She's betting on my desperation making me blind. I walked back out and placed the folder on the counter, sliding it toward her without signing. "If I ever sign something from you," I said evenly, "it'll be the paper ending your ownership of my building." Her smile didn't falter, but the temperature in her eyes dropped. "You still think you can win?" "That's adorable." "Adorable isn't the word I'd use," I replied. She picked up the folder, tucking it neatly back into her bag. "We'll see who's still standing next month." With that, she left, the door shutting softly behind her like a period at the end of a sentence. That evening, as I was locking up, my phone buzzed. Novalee again. "If you want the upper hand, meet me tomorrow night. Bring an empty bag." I looked at the wall in my office. Blueprint, debt charts, and contract copies pinned in neat rows. The pieces were aligning, the picture getting sharper. Whatever was in that bag tomorrow, it was going to change everything. I kept my outfit deliberate. Black dress, clean lines, hair pulled back, nothing flashy. Understatement was its own kind of armor. In my hand, the empty leather bag Novali had told me to bring. It felt heavier than it should, a weight that had nothing to do with the leather and everything to do with what it might soon carry. The Betrayal Luxe Events Gala was already in full swing when I stepped through the doors of the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light over tables draped in white linen. Waiters in black vests moved like clockwork between Charleston's business elite, their champagne flutes catching every flicker of light. The hum of polished conversation filled the air, punctuated by the clink of silverware and the low notes of a string quartet tucked into the corner. At the registration table, a young woman smiled brightly and handed me a badge. My smile faltered when I read it. Ivania Morel, guest. Not only misspelled, but stripped of my title, my work, reduced to an afterthought. "Your table is over there," she said, pointing to the farthest corner of the room, near the exit door. I made my way to the seat, passing clusters of people who paused just long enough to offer pitying looks. One voice, not quite hushed enough, reached me. "That's Drusilla's sister, right? The one who lost the shop?" A ripple of quiet laughter followed. I sat, smoothing my dress, my face calm even as my thoughts hardened. Let them think I was sidelined. It was easier to move when no one saw you coming. Across the room, Novali caught my eye. She tapped her wristwatch lightly, the agreed-upon signal. I gave the smallest nod and turned back to the man seated beside me, a local accountant, clearly as out of place here as I was. We traded polite small talk, the kind that filled the air without saying anything at all, while I kept one eye on the flow of the evening. An hour in, the MC's voice carried over the crowd. "We'd like to invite our key contributors and partners to the stage for a group photo." I stood and began moving toward the group, but halfway there, an event staff member stepped in front of me. "Sorry, this is for current stakeholders only." I looked past him to the stage. Drusilla stood dead center, hand resting lightly on the mayor's arm, smiling as if she owned the room. And maybe she did, for now. Her eyes met mine for the briefest moment, and the faint curve of her mouth was all teeth. The staffer gently guided me back toward the floor, and the camera flashes began. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing tray and moved to the ballroom's side door, where I could see both Drusilla on the stage and Novali at the far wall. My fingers tightened around the stem of the glass, but my posture stayed relaxed. You don't blow your cover in the middle of the hunt. The speeches droned on. The applause rose and fell. And then Novali was beside me, her voice low. "Time to go. Back entrance now." I set the champagne on a passing tray without looking, falling into step beside her. We wove through a service hallway lined with crates and linens. The hum of the ballroom faded behind us. I glanced back once, catching a last glimpse of Drusilla laughing with the mayor, utterly certain she'd just delivered the final cut. By the time she noticed I was gone, it would already be too late. The air outside Betrayal Luxe Events headquarters was cool, the kind of crisp Charleston morning that sharpened the senses. I stood on the steps, watching a slow stream of executives in tailored suits file past me into the building. Some gave polite nods, others glanced at me like I was invisible. That was fine. In my hand, the leather portfolio felt nothing like the empty prop I had carried to the gala. It was heavier now, full of documents, signatures, and proof that would turn the balance of power in this building on its head. I wasn't here for theatrics. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about setting the scales right. When I stepped into the boardroom, the contrast was stark. A long glass table gleaming under recessed lights, the skyline stretching out through the floor-to-ceiling windows. At the head sat Drusilla, a picture of poise in a cream suit, her voice carrying as she updated the board on our expansion strategy. She didn't even glance my way, as though I were just another staffer delivering coffee. I took a seat along the side, waiting. My pulse was steady, but every word out of her mouth only reinforced why I was here. She clicked through slides, speaking about market growth, flagship potential, and vision. When she reached to shuffle her notes for the next agenda item, I spoke. "Before we move forward," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the air, I think the board deserves to know who actually controls the majority of this company. Her head snapped toward me, but I was already opening the portfolio, laying out documents one by one, debt acquisition agreements, shareholder transfer contracts, bank confirmations. The rustle of paper was punctuated by the sudden stillness in the room. Several board members leaned forward, eyes flicking over signatures and dates. A low murmur started at the far end of the table. "This can't be accurate," Drusilla said quickly, her tone clipped. "Oh, it's accurate," I replied, my gaze steady on hers. "Every piece here is public record, just not public enough for you to notice until now." I let the weight of the silence settle before adding, "And there's more." I turned toward the door. "You can come in now." Novalie stepped inside, her heels quiet on the polished floor. She carried her own folder and moved with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged in the room. "In my time as Drusilla Vantrell's operations manager," Novalie began, her voice crisp, "I witnessed her use magnolia moss as collateral for a personal loan. When repayment became impossible, she orchestrated the sale under false pretenses to cover the debt. She represented the sale as a rescue for her sister's failing business. That was a lie." Gasps broke the composure of the table. One board member's pen snapped audibly between his fingers. "That's absurd," Drusilla cut in, her voice sharper now. I slid one final document across the table toward her. "Your signature, your date, your gamble." Her eyes skimmed the page, then met mine, defiant. "You think this will end me?" I didn't look away. "No, I know it will." The board chair cleared his throat, the sound loud in the charged air. "Effective immediately, Drusilla Vantrell is suspended pending a full investigation." The color drained from her face, though her chin stayed high. I gathered my papers slowly, tucking them back into the portfolio. As I stood, I leaned just close enough for only her to hear. "I'll see you at the signing." And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. The glass doors of Vantrell Luxe Events slid open with a soft hiss, and the marble floor beneath my heels echoed each step. I dressed deliberately, charcoal suit, crisp white blouse, simple but sharp. Tucked under my arm was the red folder, its weight steady, deliberate, unmistakable. Today, the seat Drusilla had gripped with both hands was going to be mine. The executive conference room was already occupied when I walked in. The board members sat in their places, murmuring over coffee, their eyes flicking up as I crossed to the far side of the table. Drusilla was there too, directly across from where I chose to sit. She didn't look at me, but the tight line of her jaw told me she felt the shift in the air. I placed the red folder squarely in the center of the table, then slid it toward the chairperson. "Everything you need to see is in here," I said. The chairperson's brow furrowed as he flipped it open. Inside were the signed agreements from debt holders, the shareholder transfers, and the bank confirmations. Irrefutable proof that I now controlled the majority stake in Vantrell Luxe Events. The quiet in the room deepened, like everyone had taken the same sharp breath and was holding it. Drusilla broke first. "This is a stunt. You can't just—" I met her gaze. "This isn't a stunt, it's ownership." Without breaking eye contact, I nodded toward the AV tech in the corner. The lights dimmed slightly as the projector hummed to life, and the shop's sale contract appeared on the screen. "Let's walk through this," I said evenly, my voice carrying in the stillness. I pointed to a highlighted section. Clause 14, authorization to use magnolia moss as collateral for a personal loan. I clicked to the next slide, the repayment terms. Clause 17, stipulation of sale under financial distress, executed without disclosure to all interested parties. Gasps moved like a current around the table. One director muttered under his breath, "This is textbook self-dealing." Drusilla's smile was frozen, her knuckles pale against the polished wood. "You're twisting." "Am I?" I advanced to the final slide, the bank's default notice with her signature beneath it. "Your signature, your date, your gamble." The chairperson cleared his throat. "We've seen enough. Drusilla, sign the resignation and transfer documents." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, with a slow exhale, she took the pen. Her hand trembled just slightly as she scrawled her name. "You built this on a lie." I said, my tone calm but unyielding. I'll rebuild it on truth. She pushed the papers away. Enjoy it while it lasts. I reached back into my folder and pulled out another document. One more thing. I unfolded it on the table so every member could see. This is the purchase reversal for Magnolia Moss, signed this morning by the holding company that acquired it. My shop is mine again, and this time, it's not in anyone else's name. There was a beat of silence before the chairperson said simply, "Congratulations, Ms. Morel." I gathered the red folder, feeling the finality settle into my bones. As I walked toward the elevator, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. The same unknown number. It's not over. She has one more card. If Drusilla still had a card to play, I'd make sure it was her last. Morning sunlight poured through the front windows of Magnolia Moss, bathing the display table in gold. For the first time in years, the air inside felt light, unburdened. I walked slowly along the counter, fingertips trailing across the polished wood. The deed in my name was tucked safely in my desk drawer, but I could feel its weight in every step I took. This was mine again, not borrowed, not held in trust, not shared. Mine. The bell over the door chimed steadily throughout the morning. Customers came in with armfuls of congratulations after seeing my name in the paper, the boardroom coup still fresh news. Mrs. Langford brought a box of lemon muffins. Even old Mr. Clay from the tailor shop across the street stopped by, pretending to look for flowers for his wife, but really just wanting to say, "Good for you, kid." I thanked each of them, letting their words settle like bricks in a wall I'd been rebuilding for years. Just before lunch, the hum of the shop changed. The door opened again, and Drusilla stepped inside. She wore a navy suit and dark glasses, even though it was overcast. Behind her, a tall man in a tailored gray suit carried a slim leather case. Her lawyer. "Let's get this over with," she said, not bothering to remove her glasses. We sat at the small table in the back office. The lawyer opened the case, withdrew the property transfer document, and began reading aloud in that slow, deliberate tone lawyers seem to practice in the mirror. Drusilla's pen was poised before he finished. She didn't look at me when she signed, just pressed the ink down like she was stamping out a flame. "I guess you don't need my little shop after all," I said. Her lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. "Enjoy it. Everything fades eventually." I slid the signed pages back toward the lawyer. "Maybe, but this one isn't fading on my watch." She stood, adjusting her jacket, ready to leave, but I caught her eye. "You should know, I don't thank you for what you did, but I do thank you for what it taught me." She gave a short laugh, dismissive, but I caught the flicker in her expression. "Don't make me into your life lesson, Ivania." "You already did that yourself," I said. She left without another word, the door shutting behind her with a finality that was almost satisfying. That afternoon, I met Corwin at a cafe on the waterfront. The air smelled faintly of salt and roasted coffee beans, the tide pulling at the pilings below. We sat at a table by the window, watching gulls circle in lazy arcs. "So, you've got the shop, you've got the company," he said, raising his cup. "What's next?" I smiled. "Next is making sure both of them thrive, and making sure no one can ever put me in that position again." He clinked his coffee cup against mine. "To winning on your own terms." We talked about supply chains, event contracts, and even the possibility of expanding Magnolia Moss into a second location. For the first time in a long time, the conversation wasn't about survival, it was about building. By late afternoon, I was back in the shop. I hung a framed copy of the deed on the wall where customers could see it. Then, I took down the old blueprint of Drusilla's flagship plan, folded it carefully, and placed it in a drawer. Not to forget, never to forget, but to keep as a reminder of what I'd outmaneuvered. As the sun dipped, I turned the sign to "closed" and began locking up. That's when a messenger came to the door, holding a plain envelope with my name, just the letter E, on the front. Inside, a single sentence in Drusilla's handwriting. "You'll never see the last move coming." I stared at it for a long moment, then smiled to myself. If she still thought the game was on, she was about to learn I'd already won. The morning light poured through the front windows of Magnolia Moss, catching on the petals of the fresh arrangements I'd set out before opening. The shop smelled of roses and eucalyptus, but my attention wasn't on the flowers. Drusilla's note lay open on the counter, her neat handwriting cutting across the paper. "You'll never see the last move coming." I read it again, slow this time, letting each word sink in. She was right about one thing: moves are meant to be answered, and mine would end the game entirely. By mid-morning, I had two things ready: a cashier's check and the folded deed transfer confirmation. I'd already called Zarina, asking her to set up a private arbitration meeting for the afternoon. "Make sure it's binding," I'd said. She'd simply replied, "It will be." When I walked into the arbitration room downtown, the air was cooler than I expected, the kind that made you notice the sound of your own shoes on the polished floor. The room was sleek, neutral gray walls, a long table, leather chairs. Drusilla was already there with her attorney, posture perfect, eyes sharp. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile meant to make you believe she still had control. I set a sealed envelope on the table and slid it across to her. "This," I said, "is the last check you'll ever cash in my name." Her attorney frowned. Drusilla rested her fingertips on the envelope, then looked at me. "You think this ends it?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "I know it does." Zarina, sitting at my side, pushed a second document forward, the mutual release agreement. "This confirms neither party has any remaining claim over the other. It's clean, it's final." Drusilla hesitated, her gaze flicking to her attorney. For a moment, I thought she might refuse, but the sound of the pen scratching over paper told me the chapter was closing. I felt it in my chest: relief, triumph, and something quieter, but just as strong. When it was done, she set the pen down. "Enjoy your win, Ivania. Everything changes." "Some things," I said, leaning back, "are worth making sure never change." An hour later, I was back at Magnolia Moss. My staff and a handful of loyal customers were gathered out front, curious about the sheet-covered frame leaning against the building. I stepped forward, hands on the fabric. "This shop has been through a lot," I began, meeting their eyes. "But some things, some roots, can't be pulled up, no matter who tries." I pulled the cover away to reveal the new sign. "Some roots can't be sold," carved into reclaimed wood from the shop's original counter. The crowd broke into applause. A few people wiped their eyes. I let their warmth wash over me, feeling the last of the weight lift from my shoulders. That night, I locked up and paused outside, looking up at the sign glowing softly in the streetlight. This wasn't just about a shop. It was about owning my story. I turned toward my car, keys in hand, when my phone rang. Corwin's name lit the screen. I answered with a smile. "You might want to sit down before you hear this," he said. "Some battles end, but the war to protect what's yours never really does.